We're now going to shift from cities to communities. Karen talked about community level, Paolo about community of practices. Now, you're there. So, G.Jung, chairman and co-founder of Intelligent Community Forum in Canada, and Lorenzo Benussi, advisor for digital and innovation policy and consortium topics. So, John, what are you saying about your community? How it's born? What is useful for? What can we do with it?
Okay, well, I guess the question really is, what's the difference between talking about cities and communities?
Yeah.
Well, we used to talk about, first of all, let me explain. We started our first conference on smart cities 20 years ago. We just last week held the anniversary conference of smart cities. So I have to say, this is old hat. It's pretty old discussion. And a lot of people talk about smart cities as something entirely new. It's not. You've been involved with it. You've been putting in broadband. You've been putting in new infrastructure for many years. Just the nomenclature has changed. People have started to use the word smart. Why? Well, because companies like Cisco and IBM and Siemens, they've been putting advertisements out. And people have begun to take advantage of that information that's out there and say, you know what, this mayor or this councilor likes this idea. Let's be more efficient. Let's be more productive. Let's put some of those routers in place and start measuring. And why are we measuring? Well, we're looking to increase our ability to spend less money to get more. You know, Mies van der Rohe said that, right? Less is more. And now cities are saying that. And asset managers and mayors and politicians are saying, we would like to get more for less, right? So as cities go, this is an old discussion. Smart cities is something that's been in discussion for 25 years. But what we need to do is start asking the question, are you getting enough smart? I think that's the way the thing was set up, smart in the city. Are you getting enough smart? I think that you need to, smart is not enough. I think you need to start talking about a much larger, holistic discussion. You need to start talking about people as part of this whole discussion. And obviously, when we start talking about communities, it's communities of people, communities of interest. It's not just about a geographic area. But once you start getting down into the discussion of cities, I'm an urban planner, urban designer, and as what Jennifer Keesmaat talked about earlier, good urban places and good planning is really what this is about. I think that we have to start going beyond the concept of smart and start to talk about higher levels of discussion. We started talking about wisdom cities or intelligent cities or communities. The Japanese, in fact, told me about 20 years ago that SMART is just an acronym or it's an idea that's not good enough. You want to actually go to the apex and start talking about intelligence. So where does it differ? Well, I'm not sure it's so much an issue of being different. It's maybe an issue of going from smart to intelligence. And getting to that point is a process. So smart cities or smart communities is about infrastructure and making the best use of the technologies, infrastructure that's available. So how do you do that? Well, you start to investigate it and measure it. And asset managers and people who are involved in predictive analysis take this big data that they've been able to generate as a result of all these metrics that are being measured by sensors and everything else, and they're being able to look at the predictive analysis to say, this is how our budget's going to work for this year, and maybe by spending less or more strategically, we can get more for less. So what we do is we start to look at communities, and I work with 134 cities around the world who have evolved as smart cities and have begun to become intelligent communities. And out of those, we've determined that a lot of them are able to really create smart capabilities. They're already on the verge of looking at machine-to-machine Internet of Things. All we need is to get that protocol working, and IEEE is working on that protocol. And once that protocol comes into place, which they anticipate will only be a couple of years from now, all of a sudden 50 million things that are sitting there waiting to start to connect with each other are going to connect. And there's going to be a huge disruptive moment in time when we're going to have to think about how those technologies are impacting our communities. So that means we need to have some really smart people to be able to deal with that. And that's when you start to go from just smart technologies and smart infrastructure to smart people through a learning and knowledge economy. You have to have a knowledge-based society to be able to deal with all of this smart infrastructure that we're building. Knowing what to do with it and how to deal with it is really important. And that doesn't mean you just deal with universities or postgraduates. That means you start from kindergarten to grade 12, teaching kids about entrepreneurialism and how to use this technology in a good and positive way. Because there's a lot of other stuff underneath the underbelly of this technology that's not so good. We also then say if you've got really smart people and you've got smart technologies, now you can innovate, now you can create, now you can undertake to create disruptive technologies and systems that are really positive for society. Wealth creation will come from that. People will be able to have a different and new kind of job, as our previous speakers talked about. And now we get into some of the softer social things that are a little bit more difficult to measure, but very important as part of the process. In the United States, we talked about digital democracy for many years. Now it's really a discussion around digital inclusion and how we can get everybody to participate, those who are disenfranchised, single mothers at home, people who have lots to contribute but somehow haven't been able to participate. And some people are talking about that, of course, inclusionary aspect as being part of the new civil society. And we also talk about the fact that once you have a good system like that, you need to create a way in which it's embedded in the society through good public policies. And so this is where good governance comes in. You need to have these good public policies that are also funded and continuously funded so that it can go on beyond individuals and beyond a group of people, that it's embedded as a societal requirement. The internet is now a human right. That wasn't like that before. And many countries are embracing that. You're able to create these new jobs, new places. You create a sense of stability and confidence because of good governance that now does a couple of really interesting things. One, it helps to create and attract talent. Immigration is also a positive thing. In terms of the creation of that talent, you want to be able to have that knowledge society in place. But you also want to be able to retain it. So in terms of understanding that, we were talking last night about a study that was done by the Knight Foundation. This is a newspaper chain in the United States. It has over 30-odd cities that they investigated, and they wondered why the people who were talent, who would read their newspapers, why they were leaving those cities. So they studied it, and they said, coming out of it, there were a lot of recommendations, but there were three very key recommendations. One, affordable housing, having access to affordable housing. Two, having access to affordable and very good transportation. And three, things to do. These are human things that we all want in our cities. If we have good cities, these are places where our families will thrive, where people will want to come and stay. On the other hand, you also are able to attract investment through that confidence and stability of good governance. There are many other things that make up these intelligent communities. You have to look at how collaboration works, how you ensure and nurture leadership as part of a good society. To be able to have that confidence also attracts risk capital. There are a lot of venture capitalists that won't come into some cities for a certain reason. And when you do all of these things, then you have the ability to create and perform good urban design in your communities and good transportation systems and so forth that will help to create really good cities and keep and attract the investment and talent that's necessary for these intelligent communities to thrive. Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have always something different in Italy as an intelligent community.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. Thank you for all these events. It's incredibly interesting, and I think it's also very productive to share our approach that is similar in many points. I've been in Toronto last year, and I was impressed by how far they go on open data or social innovation. It was absolutely fascinating for me. I feel a bit frustrating, and I want to be a little provocative too. I feel frustrating because we all agree about many things. So we have to invest on people and education. Cities are not technology. City should attract people to stay, to live in a rich and cultural environment with many things to do, but they also have to work, of course, in the city. And I don't know how to solve this puzzle. And so I'd like to present some trade-off or some problem I'm facing in my daily work with a smart city in Italy. The first trade-off is maintenance versus innovation. One of the main problems I see in managing the funds or project of the smart city is the difference between building a new road or a broadband infrastructure from one side, so investing in physical things, and from the other side building social streets, for example, so investing in a network of people doing new things that are extremely important because maybe they can create a new way of distributing food, for example, and it's something that it's happening very often in Bologna and Turin, for example. So we are reinventing the food chain by using internet and basically connecting people. So it's better to invest in roads, and that of course cost billions of euros, or investing in a new network of people. And the first provocative idea is imagine how much we can do if we switch the all investment we place for road to people. So billions of euros for people creating a new way of doing things. That would be absolutely massive because, you know, with 1 billion euro you create 1.5 billion euro you create a new port in Bari. With 1.5 billion euro you create a whole new economy in Italy and also probably in Europe. That's the first point. And that's important because I've been in China a couple of times, and they are building their smart city basically driven by efficiency. So they measure and they want to do things cheaper and faster, because they are facing big problem of urbanization, etc. But that's not productive in the long term, or probably also in the middle term, because productivity has it has decrease in marginal productivity. So you can be productive, efficient to a certain point when your slope is going down, and that's stops. So you are investing a lot of money probably in something that is not so productive. On the other way, Europe, it's Europe and probably also Canada and the Western country, we are talking a lot about holistic approach, social innovation, but at the end of the day, it's nothing, or it's something that probably would have been created even without the public's intervention. So from one side, in the east, we have this very fast track of physical and very efficiency-driven development. From the other side, we have this humanistic approach, but it's complicated to basically understand how it impacts our society. And then the other trade-off is the measurement. We have a big problem with the definition and measurement. With definition, why? Because if smart is a new technology or a new infrastructure, okay, we can put in place different monitoring models so that it's quite well known and it works. CO2 reducing emission, reducing congestion and traffic in the cities. It's everything we are really used to this measurement. But if we want to understand how a new, for example, healthcare system based on connecting people is changing our society, that's much more difficult. And so I think that we tend to go on the first part of the smart city because it's easier, but we have to think about impact measurement. And my proposal is to look at how Wikipedia works. So we can maybe try to invent a wiki measurement where all the stakeholders collaborate in the measurement of project. Paolo knows, because we were working on the Smart City platform, that it's our dreams in a way. So bringing all the stakeholders, the public administration, citizen, the people who's working in the project that can measure the evolution of the project. Not just the public administration or the financial system, but everybody. Also citizen. So wiki measurement. The last problem, I think this is the biggest one, but the last one is smart city versus product city. We are building product city. Cisco is selling the same system to different cities in the world, and we are investing in products. There is also some experience in Italy where the public funded project for the city, a lot of million euro invested in new technology, for example, towards Cisco or IBM, and then IBM developed the new smart city solution to sell to the public. So we are going to pay the things both times. And that's actually a big problem. That's one side. The other side, that's the trade-off, is it's impossible to create small personalized solution that can scale up, because that's the other side of the coin. So we cannot leave all the decision and the power to Cisco, but we cannot also invest in small, little, tiny solution for Bologna, Ferrara, Copenhagen, and so I don't know how to solve this problem, but that's absolutely something we have to take into our minds. And the last remark is about data. We are all talking about data, but how can we prevent the centralization of power, data power in the smart city? Because I have this doubt that we are building a very, very intelligent dashboard for the major, but citizens are not, they don't access this information. So we are not building consensus. We are building more authoritarian, and in the long run, probably very, very efficient-based authoritarian society, where few people has all the information, and the other, nothing. And that's not democracy, that's absolutely the contrary, and that's how Chinese government works. And people, it's usually willing to live their freedom for efficiency. And that's I think, absolutely the European way of thinking, and where, as European or Western country, we can provide our contribution to the world. It's better a more complicated or less efficient society, but democratic, or a very data-driven, absolutely efficient society, but not democratic. So the last three provocative sentences are: stop funding infrastructure, stop funding technology. Technology are not so useful at the end of the day, so stop funding technology. And stop funding coordination, because coordination, it's impossible. So we've been working a lot in Italy in the last year, building a coordination infrastructure for smart city. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because, they say before in the previous panel. So we're probably better to focus on network, connection, and commons, building commons. So building digital commons, building knowledge that can be used in different places, but not thinking of top-down coordination.
Thank you, Lorenzo. So, a lot of things on the wall, so up to you now. But I have a word since this morning, which is indicators. Number, figures, data, indicators. On that, I would like to discuss a little bit more. Even talking about works, jobs, can it be some smart works? Can it be some wiki measurement, as he said? Up to you, John.
Well, indicators are important. I mean, you can only improve by better understanding through measurement. And you can't fix what you can't measure. So I think the issue really is how important is it and how useful is it? Is it something that will aid our society, or is it something we should just be aware of so that we can constantly undertake best practices and benchmark against ourselves so that we can become better? But I think a lot of this really needs to talk about, our ability to act as humans and think in terms of our ability to work together. And the concept of working together really engenders a different kind of word that is more difficult today to work in, and that's around trust. The internet. Do you trust the internet? Do you trust the ability to use your credit card in restaurants these days without worrying that it might engender fraud at some point? Do you trust each other as communities to work together to create a new society? And so our technology and tools that are available today create both sides of the ledger, really good things and really bad things. And so I think working towards achieving trust is a word called collaboration. Cooperation and organization are words that don't engender trust. So I think what we need to do is find leadership that engenders trust, and find a community of people and places and things. Remember, the Internet of Things is another thing that's going to happen to us, that we can trust. And outside of those things that we can control and deal with, it's going to be very difficult. And so what we need is to create very knowledgeable people, and that's a job that doesn't just start overnight. We have to start from kindergarten and move all the way up. It's going to take, a couple of decades. But start now. We have the ability to use all of these tools to create really wonderful communities, wonderful cities, wonderful societies. But if at one point that link is broken, none of it works, because now you don't trust it.
Right. I agree.
Absolutely.
Would you like to add something? And then
absolutely
you can
agree.
make some remarks. Please, Lorenzo.
I absolutely agree. We have to build a new common ground and trust. That's why I prefer the open data instead of the big data buzzword. They are all buzzword in definition. But the problem is the data society can work only if there is a new trust, a new idea of common ground and the consensus building. All these things are really, really at the core of the smart city evolution. And the other part is that I like to quote Marianna Mazzucato that wrote this very interesting book about the entrepreneurial states. She's an Italian economist working for the UK government. And the idea is that because of states are getting weaker and weaker, we need to reinvent the policy on this field, not just fixing the market failure, as was the tradition of innovation policy, but driving innovation. So reinventing the public procurement and taking a new kind of risk, so reforming the public procurement and investing in people instead of stuff.
Yeah, and I think what it is a balance. We have to look for a way to balance our investments in infrastructure, everything from good roads and services and high-speed broadband. By the way, cities still are competitive. Nations are competitive. People are competitive by nature. You can still work together and collaborate and so forth. But the idea of competition isn't bad. What happens is if you don't create really good infrastructure as part of the base foundation, you're going to fall behind. And one of the key elements in smart cities, intelligent communities, still is creating a really good base of high-speed broadband. And that is, I think, a critical issue. It's as important as water and sewers as part of a city. It's not a commodity, it's a utility. It's a human right, and it's an important piece of being able to move forward with education and with new jobs and so forth. It's no longer disruptive, it's a fact of life. And what I think we have to do is create an increasing level of access. It's no longer good enough to have only 12 megabits, which tends to be what seems to be in a lot of cities. 100 is a minimum. And I would say 100 up and 100 down. I'll give you an example. The city of Toronto, years ago, came to one of our programs, and we said the same thing I'm saying right now. And the president of the Toronto Waterfront, Waterfront Toronto, took that to heart and created what they call an intelligent waterfront. And the first thing they did was to say, in order to get the kinds of new businesses and new interest on the waterfront, was to put in an open-sourced high-speed broadband capability. And they have a gigabyte environment there with a minimum of 500 up and 500 down. And they make it accessible at a reasonable price for everyone. And that is a key to the evolution of that space that for years, I used to be involved in directing that waterfront for years, but couldn't get anything to happen. And one of the triggers then became the opportunity to actually put broadband in this space. That really emerged a whole new set of uses, people, places. Now the Pan Am Games are there and so forth. But that was a key trigger in making things happen.
Yeah. So, up to you now. We have a couple of minutes. I can say in the meantime that talking about data, big data, and trust, probably, well, I'm quite sure that trust can be useful, can be achieved also in listening. So sentiment analysis and big data analysis can be one of the issue, because the network is giving you, as a politician, let's say, a lot of information. So you can at least understanding what people want from you. So big data can be seen in this from this point of view. Please.
Aldo Milan, Italian Regulatory Authority.
Okay.
Magical. Well, data are the oil of the new economy. So when we study the smart city, we have to address the efficiency, that's okay, but also the evolution and the ability to offer economical externalities, then produce more data. And that's a real problem, how to regulate it, but we have to address that direction, then produce more data, because data are the oil of the new economy. And that's a clear problem, how to offer that externalities to the citizens. Well, I live in a smart city. I live in a city.
Would you say that?
In Rome,
Okay.
in a smart city.
Is it smart?
In Rome, but
Okay.
but because
2,000 years ago.
I can't live in a smart country, then normally I have many plugs in my smart cities: water, gas, transportation, data. But I need more plugs in the future, because data led me to work in the new economy. Then what about the regulation and the common regulation? What about the regulation of the connectivity for the smart cities, but in the smart countries in general? That's a big issue and a big problem, because, for instance, is it possible to offer a connectivity model for the smart lighting with revenues per lines of about 10 euros per month? It's not possible. So what is the connectivity model and the productivity models for the smart cities? That's an open issue.
Please.
You don't work for IBM, do you? Okay, data is the oil of the new economy is an IBM tagline. Okay, they use the concept of oil as an example, and connectivity is also a word that also translates into distribution. And so a lot of things that are a problem in societies, we talked about food and water and so forth, is the problem of distribution for a country. So think about India. India has no water problem. They have a distribution problem. They can dig down and get water from aquifers and desalinate and do all sorts of things, but they can't get water to certain villages. And it's a problem of distribution or connectivity. Now, it's the same thing with food in certain countries. And so distribution, maybe we need to start changing the words. It's distribution or it's movement. It's not transport. It's about how you get things moved from one place to another. Ideas can be moved from one place to another. Information can be moved from one place to another. And there's value added to all of those things. So connectivity is really, really important when you start talking about ideas, the sense that we're creating a lot of data that needs to move. Some of it isn't necessarily just for jobs. Some of it's for entertainment. I mean, look at how Netflix has impacted the use of our broadband in parts of the world. That all of a sudden has created real value, and people are actually paying for it. For the first time in society, people are looking at broadband and saying, on their bills, and saying, gee, I have to increase my broadband in order to be able to get more Netflix. And we're willing to pay for it. So we're willing to pay for that distribution and that connectivity. Well, you can translate that down to every part of society. Water, food. All of a sudden, these things start to have a specific value. And how do we now make sure everybody participates and we get that to everybody at every level of society as well? So it's very important. It kind of covers this discussion around digital inclusion and the importance of the value of that value-added piece that everybody should be able to participate in, no matter whether they can afford it or not.
Would you add something?
Yeah, I think, yeah, the only solution, very, very fast, the only solution for the data problem is making data available for everybody, because there is a principle of data gravity, data attract other data, so people that, organization that has a lot of data are going to have even more data in the future. In order to balance this power, we have to make all the data available, of course changing the privacy norms, the law, but also the way we are looking to the privacy. That's the first thing. And the other thing is the entrepreneurial state. So we have to stop thinking of a state that's just fixing market failure. That is something that we are not going to be very good in Italy at all, but a state that is the first player and can build for itself infrastructure, manage new things in order to be an active promoter of innovation.
Thank you. Yes, please. Just a second for the mic.
Quick question. Just a few.
The mic, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Short question about.
The mic should be
Closer.
Yeah.
Short question about privacy. How do you feel about privacy outside Italy? I know only.
Do we have a couple of hours more?
No. Sure.
Well, privacy is a key issue. When you open up things and you make everything available, then you have to start looking at the balance between your rights for privacy and information that's being shared. We're just learning. You know, it's an iterative process that we're going through as societies to figure out how to do that unique balance act. I think where it gets to be more important is when you look at the underbelly. It's not just privacy of somebody saying, you know, that we're all sitting here and having this event, and maybe we want to keep it just to ourselves, but it's more important when there are issues of kids being bullied, or there's pedophiles, and there's all this other, you know, fraud that takes place, and the stealing of your identity. So there's a lot that we have to balance out versus the ability to use that open sourced, open data for open innovation purposes.
Great.
And so I think at the end of the day, we're still at the early stages of that. Where it's going to get really bad is when the Internet of Things starts to invade your privacy and you don't even know this. Because it's already latent inside your smartphones, waiting for the connectivity of all of the different things to connect. So we have to be vigilant, and we have to start to work at understanding where those fine lines are and put some rules into place that deal with that.
Thank you. Is there something more?